I want to talk about an incredible book that just hit our radar. Aeromasters celebrating a century of the American fighter pilot. This isn't just a book, it's a visual masterpiece. It features over 2 years of original research, incredible stories of bravery, and jaw-dropping aerial photography. It's the perfect addition to any home and a spectacular gift for the history or aviation fan in your life. Don't miss out on this limited edition commemorative book. Do yourself a favor, open up your podcast app right now and click the direct link in our show notes to order your copy of Aeromasters. It truly honors the American hero. Imagine a cold, rain-soaked night in October 1849. A man is found wandering the streets of Baltimore, delirious, dressed in clothes that aren't his own, and whispering a name into the fog. Days later, he is dead, taking the secret of his final hours to a lonely grave. He was a pioneer of the American short story, the inventor of the detective fiction genre, and a man whose very name is synonymous with horror, mystery, and the macabre. We are talking, of course, about Edgar Allan Poe. But the mystery didn't end with his death. For decades, his final resting place became the site of a bizarre tradition where a cloaked stranger known only as the Poe Toaster would appear in the dead of night to leave 3 roses and a half-empty bottle of cognac on his headstone. Welcome to Talk with History. One filmmaker, one historian, leading history-inspired world travels for the curious, the history lovers, and the explorer in us all. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jen.
Hello.
Today, we are stepping into the shadows of literary history. Jen recently traveled to Baltimore, Maryland to visit the historic Westminster Hall and burying ground, to stand before the monument to Edgar Allan Poe and his original, more hidden, grave. We're diving deep into the tragic, mysterious circumstances surrounding his death, the shifting history of his actual burial plot, and what it's like to explore one of the most hauntingly beautiful cemetery sites in America. I'm Scott Benny, and today we are knocking on the door of the ultimate master of mystery. All right, Jen. Edgar Allan Poe.
I'm a fan, right? I think, didn't you have to read him in school growing up?
I think all of us do, especially here in the States. And Edgar Allan Poe was always so interesting to me because it wasn't quite my thing, but people are oddly attracted to his writing and kind of his whole aura.
Yeah, well, I think I'm a huge fan of The Raven. I think we had to read that in school. And the measure and the pace of his poetry is always kind of mysterious anyway. And I love The Raven and how he kind of weaves that story together. And then Simpsons did a really good job with it.
Yeah. I mean, Edgar Allan Poe is a household name here in the States. He's a world famous writer, right? An American writer. And of course, he's kind of a part of American culture.
And so much so when I went to Baltimore, this was my second time to really get into Baltimore. And the first time I was there, I really wanted to do Fort McHenry because of the Star Spangled Banner. But the second thing I wanted to do was go to Edgar Allan Poe's grave, because that's kind of what as Americans of Baltimore. And so much so it's into our NFL team. The Baltimore Ravens are named for his poem, The Raven. Yeah. So I really wanted to go there. I was lucky. It's within walking distance of downtown Baltimore where I was. And it's a beautiful cemetery, well kept. I had great access. And then to tell his story. And as we dive more into Edgar Allan Poe and his life, I am always amazed because writers at this time do not really make it big, right?
That's true. And I would say, and we'll talk more about this, for him specifically, he was well known at the time, but became like his legend became much greater after his death.
Yeah. I mean, we get people like Herman Melville who write Moby Dick and never appreciated in their time. Now it's considered like the greatest novel, one of the greatest novels. And he dies destitute because writers are not like really appreciated in their time. And even Poe, it's this folklore after his time and this whole mystery of trying to discourage his name and bury his name. that really brings him into prosperity. You get rare people like Dickens, but even when I went to Dickens' house, he didn't make it for a very long time as a writer, destitute, and then finally something took off, right? So you have to realize writers at the time, Oscar Wilde, people who are doing this, it's because they have to. They love to. They're artists. And that's very much Poe. It's like, even though he tries his hand at the military, we'll talk about this, his lifestyle, it's the writing that is what he does his whole life.
Yeah.
It's like he has to do it.
Now, before we get too much kind of into his background, I do want to give a quick shout out to someone who wrote us a 5-star review.
Oh, awesome.
So we got a 5-star review from, and I wonder if this person is a Naval Academy person because their name on Apple Podcasts is Tecumseh 1388. So the 5-star review, it says, "So well done. This is such an informative history podcast. Thank you." So I have seen our 5-star reviews kind of ticking up on Apple Podcasts. So thank you everybody for doing that. Please continue to leave those reviews, or at least you don't even have to write anything. You can just go in there and drop 5 stars. So it really does kind of help give us some street cred. And I just want to say thank you to Tecumseh 1388.
Yeah, we're trying to catch the History Channel.
Yes, we're getting there, talking about Edgar Allan Poe.
Bringing history back to the History Channel.
Yes.
There will be no aliens in this podcast.
So talking about the Naval Academy in Tecumseh and our military background, Edgar Allan Poe has a military background. And I don't know if a lot of people know that.
So you have to realize Poe, he's orphaned, right? So he comes from a strong military background. That's why he's buried in the family Poe plot in Baltimore, Maryland, because his grandfather is actually a business leader of Baltimore. So much so during the Revolution, when Lafayette comes through and his soldiers are wearing threadbare uniforms, his grandfather sponsors them to all get all new uniforms.
Oh, wow. So the Poe family name is well known in the Baltimore area.
Well known in the Baltimore area. And so much so, like when Lafayette does his return tour, he wants to especially like pay homage to Baltimore and the Poe family.
Oh, wow.
So it's like just an important family that really supported the American Revolution. And so when it's that son, David Poe, who is Edgar Allan Poe's father, David Poe Jr., he is an actor. And so this is, again, at the time, it's not what you think of actors today. It's an art love that you really are almost destitute again.
I mean, if you're thinking about this is late 1700s, early 1800s that someone's trying to make a living as an actor.
Yes. And so he's an actor and he marries another actress. So again, 2 people who are barely making ends meet. Wow. And she has 2 sons. Pretty quickly, William is his older brother, and then Edgar Allan Poe is born January 19th, 1809, his second son. And then David, you have to imagine, we talk about this a lot, when things are hard and life isn't going well, men turn to alcohol, and women too, to self-medicate because there's no talking about your feelings then and working it out.
It wasn't a thing.
So he becomes an alcoholic.
This is the older brother, or this is the father?
The father.
The father, okay.
And he abandons the family right as she's pregnant with their 3rd child, which is a daughter. And then he will die of, they believe, tuberculosis.
Okay.
In 1811, right after the daughter is born. And
that's not long after Edgar Allan Poe, too, because he was born in 1809.
Yes. Edgar Allan Poe will say that my father David died on the 2nd year of my age when my sister Rosalind was an infant in arms. Now, his wife will also die in 1811.
Okay, so this is the kid's mom.
Yes.
Okay.
So she dies early on 1811. He'll die December 1811. So these kids are all now orphaned, right? Wow. Now, remember, they have a famous paternal grandparent, right? Because so that the oldest son goes to live with them. And then Edgar goes to Richmond, Virginia to the Allen family. And then Rosalind, she also goes to Richmond, Virginia to the Mackenzie family. The reason why is because the Poe family is in Richmond at the time. And even though David has abandoned the family, his mother, Eliza, she's a pretty famous actress. She's been performing a lot. Huh. So it's kind of like these benefactors of...
So they're the ones who take the kids in.
And that's where Allen gets that middle name, Edgar Allan Poe.
He got it from the family that took him in.
Yes, kind of to pay respect to them. So again, why does he join the military? It's because he's unable to support himself, right? And his grandparents are helping support this grandchild. He can't support himself. And so the Allan family tells him, you have to go make your way in the world.
Yeah.
And so military is in his background. So he enlists in the army in 1827. Now he uses Edgar A. Perry as his name. He claims he's 22, he's actually 18. So he actually tries to go to the University of Virginia first in 1826 to study ancient and modern languages. But he has strict rules against gambling, guns, tobacco, alcohol, all of the things which Edgar Allan Poe likes to do because he is young and in college.
So he's like, no thanks.
Yeah. So he gets kicked out. So, and then he also loses his money because the Allan family loses their money. So he returns to Richmond, and that's when, again, the Allan family is like, you have to support yourself.
Yeah, we can't support you.
We can't support you. So that's when he enlists in the army in 1827. And he serves at Fort Independence in Boston Harbor. He actually gets promoted to the highest rank he could be, sergeant major for the artillery. It's the highest rank he could be as a non-commissioned officer. And then he sought to end his 5-year enlistment early. His commanding officer said they would let him out of his enlistment if he reconciled with the Allan family. So he has to write back to the Allan family saying, can I come back and can I reconcile with you? And they're kind of unsympathetic to his pleas.
Interesting.
So the benefactor's wife dies in 1829, and this softens Allan's heart. And so he agrees to support his desire to attend West Point.
Oh, okay. Because so back then to get to West Point, to go to West Point, you had to have so I assume it sounds like someone
an appointment
from someone or someone that supports you going. Okay.
Yep. And so he's discharged from the military in 1829, and he secures a placement at West Point. And so that's when he moves back to Baltimore for a short period of time and stays with his widowed aunt, Maria Clem, and meets her daughter, Virginia Clem, who's his first cousin.
And that's who he marries, right?
Yes. And he also says that's the first time he's heard very first words of encouragement, someone who actually believes in him. I think that's where that love starts as well.
Okay.
So it's the first time he felt somebody actually
So does he decide not to go run off to West Point?
No, he goes to West Point. He becomes a cadet July 1st, 1830, but that's when he meets them. Like he meets his first cousin.
The same. Okay.
And kind of sets that connection with them. And then the Allan male gets remarried to a second wife, and she wants nothing to do with these adopted children that are now adults that really can't stand on their own. And so
they just cut him off.
And so he's disowned by
the Allan family.
The Allan family.
Man, he kind of had it rough.
He did. And so I think during all of this, he has a rough time at West Point because he's feeling the only father he's ever known.
And the only family he kind of really, truly had.
And if you realize he only really got words of encouragement from his first cousin, Virginia, and her mother, he's tried for gross negligence of duty at West Point. Disobedience, not going to formations, not going to classes. And so February 8th, 1831, he goes to a court-martial. He pleads not guilty and asks to be dismissed instead.
Okay. All right. So he does go for a short period of time, barely a year.
Yep.
And can't hack it. And because of a multitude of reasons, right? It happens to everybody. Mm-hmm. And so does he come back home to Baltimore? He
does. And what happens too is he is writing poems during this time, and his fellow cadets love him. Right? His fellow cadets love the poems. Because think about all this time sitting on watch and duty.
I mean, and that's kind of why poetry was a little bit more of a thing back then.
And so they love to hear him talk. They love to hear him tell the poems. And so his first book, he writes a volume of poems titled Poems. It's financed through his fellow cadets at West Point.
Oh, wow.
Some of them donate as much as 75 cents, and a total of $170 was raised. And so that really was, I guess, a good example of him being supported by his fellow.
So that's kind of a signal to him. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, I've got something here.
Yep. And so he returns to Baltimore to his aunt, his brother, and his cousin, Virginia, March 1831.
Okay. So then he gets to Baltimore, and we'll kind of fast forward because some of the more fascinating things in his life, and I didn't know a lot about that about Poe and his background because I think that's interesting. People are very kind of pretty familiar with his works, with The Raven and some of the short stories that he wrote. Telltale Heart, right? That's a big one, right? Even in high school, I think I had to read that.
Yes.
So he kind of gets this publishing career, right? Becomes relatively well known.
So what happens is, again, publishing, he has to kind of move around to where the jobs are, right? And he's working in newspapers and he's editing and he's helping. So there's an Edgar Allan Poe house in Philadelphia. They believe that's where he wrote The Raven. And they believe that because there are letters of rejection of The Raven being published, sent to him in Philadelphia.
Gotcha.
So they believe he finished it there, he wrote it there, and then he was sending it out to people. And
he's following work around.
He's following work around. He, in 1835, so this is 1831, he comes back. His brother dies in August of 1831. His brother dies of tuberculosis. So know that this is a common illness at the time. And so he, in 1835, will marry his cousin, Virginia Clem. Now, he's 26 at the time. She is 13.
Oof.
Now different time. She will claim to be older because at 13 you need your parents' permission to marry. So she claims to be older, but they're married for 11 years until she dies.
Wow.
So, and people believe that it really was a love match. Like they really loved each other. But she will follow him around, and she gets sick early on with tuberculosis, and he helps take care of her. She's coughing up blood. So her mother lives with them as well, Maria Clem, to help take care of her. And she really helps take care of Poe. Like she mends his clothes. I remember when he's in Philadelphia, his clothes are threadbare. Like he doesn't even have enough money to buy a second suit. And so she's constantly fixing the suit. So you have to realize as a writer, he's barely making ends meet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's writing, again, Master of the Macabre, Master of the First Detective novel, really. He's writing these, what we think of today as masterpieces.
Yeah.
But they're so new, and to get them to the public, to get the public to read them and see them, a lot of times people would write in serials, right? They would post like a page in a newspaper every week, and the story would go on and on and on. A lot of famous authors started that way, Dickens. But this is kind of what he's doing. So he's following the jobs around Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston. And so this is kind of how his life keeps progressing, but he comes into contact with another writer who's going to actually try to sabotage Poe's life, and ends up making Poe's life.
Yeah. And so this was interesting because we were talking a little bit about this yesterday before we came up to record. And I said, hey, did you read a lot about after Poe died? Because I started doing my own kind of just quick, again, kind of jokingly non-historian research. And one of the things that I discovered was Poe, right, wasn't really super famous at the time, like you said. So he didn't have necessarily a reputation. He didn't have this reputation that we know of him today, of this kind of, his work is kind of read and thought of in this kind of dark, moody, like you said, the Master of the Macabre type way. And that really wasn't there even when he passed in 1849 or just before he passed.
So you have to understand, Poe is, I love him because he takes his writing very seriously and he thinks he's really good, right?
Yeah.
And so much so that he alienates other writers. He accuses Henry Wadsworth Longfellow of plagiarism.
Oh, really?
Longfellow never responds. He publicly accuses him of it. And
Longfellow's a big name.
And that's a big name, and he's well known and popular. And so Poe is one of these people, like, he really doesn't care about how it looks. He only cares about the art, right? And how that looks. And so Virginia, she'll show first signs of consumptions of tuberculosis in 1842. I think at this time they might be in New York at this time. And she passes away in 1845. And he is so distraught, right? Or it's 1845, 1846. He is so distraught when he loses his wife. But right before that, January 29th, 1845, The Raven is published.
Yeah.
It appears in the Evening Mirror and it becomes a popular sensation. So once it's actually published, it does make him a household name. He's only paid $9 for it though. So this is the issue, is people start to, who's this Poe guy? This is a really good poem.
Yeah.
But Poe ain't making money. $9, which equivalent is $300 today, is what he made for The Raven, the poem that makes him a household name. Now, a household name means people say his name. Who's this Poe guy? He's a Longfellow. Yeah. He's at Washington Irving, but he's not in the upper echelons now of the writing community. So he's still moving around, and then it'll be January 30th, 1847, 2 years later, Virginia will die at that cottage in New York. This is where he's completely unstable after his wife's death. He will attempt to court other women. This is one of the issues that gets him in trouble with Griswold, because other women do respond to Poe.
Now, Griswold, I think I was mentioning him earlier. Yeah. This is the other writer, one of the ones that he had alienated. And I think one of the things, there was some animosity between them. What I was reading was Griswold was another writer, I think came out with a kind of a book of poetry, tried to publish a book, and had asked Poe, said, hey, you're write poetry as well. Can you review this? Can you write a review? Right. And when they would do this, it's not like they're doing it inside the book, like a blurb, like they do nowadays. They're doing this, like writing a review in the local newspaper or something like that. And I guess Poe was like, sure. And then just tears him a new one and just says, hey, this is trash. And so he kind of like stabs him in the back. I mean, Poe, that was kind of a jerk move, And so Griswold just like, forget you, man. Like, what the heck?
So what happens is he's an interesting character if you read about him. I think a little bit of a narcissist, which doesn't...
so is Poe.
So is Poe. But Griswold wasn't as good as Poe. And what Griswold did, he was called a literary anthropologist. And I think that's where they gather a bunch of other people's poetry and put it into one chronicle. He put it into one like annual edition. And Poe, was mad that he was included in that because he didn't feel like he picked the best people. And Poe did not wanted to be
like associated with them,
associated with that kind of poetry. Griswold thought that he did a good job picking these poets, and I think he doctored some of the stuff up, and Poe called him out on all of that. And then they were both hired by the same writing house to do edits of different articles, and Griswold made more.
Yeah.
And so then Poe was always upset about that as well.
Yeah, I read that.
So Griswold was very, again, insulted that Poe did this. Poe is now a household name. Griswold's not a household name. Griswold is just collecting other people's poetry. So he's not a great writer himself. He's trying to make his name on other people's writing. And they also, I don't know if they try to court the same woman, but they come in contact with the same woman.
Yeah, and I think what I read was
Osgood.
There was kind of a woman that was also a writer. She was also a writer. Mm-hmm. And so Griswold was interested in her, but she was kind of more interested in Poe. She kind of had eyes for Poe. And so, and I don't know if this was right after Poe's wife had passed or whatever like that. But so again, Griswold's paying Poe to kind of write a review. Poe writes a scathing review after taking the money.
Yes.
The job thing, Griswold's getting paid more. Poe's bitter about it. A woman, right? So there is no lost love between these two.
And that woman, to her credit, Griswold's just saying, I like your work, and I'm gonna write you a little bit of my stuff to woo you. And she's like, huh? That's horrible. Poe writes her beautiful love poems, and she's like, oh, this guy's got it.
Yeah.
And that's why she responds more to Poe's poetry. And so she likes Poe a lot more. Griswold is very rebuffed by that. So it just adds fuel to the fire. After Poe dies, I think Griswold was kind of like waiting.
Yeah, so that's what I read as well. And that what I found so interesting was Griswold, spoiler alert, was essentially the guy who gave Poe his reputation as this master of the macabre.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of walk you guys through that here in just a second. But essentially what I read was after Poe passed, Griswold went into action. He sprung into action right away and wrote this just scathing obituary of Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, so Rufus Wilmot Griswold wrote this highly slanted, high-profile obituary under a pseudonym that was published the very next day after Poe died. So this is what creates all this mystery. How did Poe die? Why was he found in different clothes in the gutters of Baltimore? How is he so sick? And then he's mumbling words and then he dies. Was he poisoned? For him to have this obituary, this scathing obituary ready to be published the day after his death, it lends itself to more of a story here.
It does. And before we go deeper into that, I do want to talk quickly about kind of the mystery around his death, because there's a couple theories.
Sure.
Right? So Poe passed. They found him wandering the streets of Baltimore, kind of muttering incoherently. I believe he actually ended up in a hospital, but ended up passing in a hospital after a couple of days. Mm-hmm. Wasn't in his own clothes. And everybody's like, what in the world happened here? Well, one of the things that I read that I found very interesting was there was like a theory of, they call it co-opting, for election fraud. So at the time, it seems like there would be kind of political factions that would basically try to grab people and say, hey, go vote for this person, but they'd make them change clothes. And so they'd make them change clothes, go do the vote, and then have them hightail it out of there.
There's no voter ID.
There's no voter ID, right?
In 1849.
And so that was one theory, was, these ruffians had grabbed Poe and said, hey, change your clothes and go vote for this guy. And, who knows, maybe he had been, something else had been going on. But I thought that was just kind of interesting. And I was like, oh, it kind of fits, right? And then there's some other theories as well.
Yeah. So again, he dies 1849. Remember, Virginia, his wife, who he adored, dies in 1847. So 2 years of a downward spiral. I would think Rufus Griswold would just have to wait for the inevitable.
Yeah.
Because Poe was already on his own downfall. He falls into alcoholism. He's getting sick on his own. He can't afford his own clothing, his own care.
Yeah, he's spiraling.
So he's kind of waiting for that. But the way it happens, the circumstances around his death almost feels like it was pushed over the edge. And because this obituary published by Griswold, and he uses the pseudonym Ludwig, appears in the New York Tribune just the very next day. And in this high profile obituary that basically everybody reads, he talks about Poe as a lunatic, a person who walks the streets in madness and melancholy, lips moving in indistinct curses with his eyes upturned during passionate prayers. And what sells, right? What gets clicks today is that sensationalism.
Yeah.
And so this obituary that creates this poor downhearted man as this scathing scoundrel, it sells.
And if you think about it, that is not your typical obituary. So if people are out there reading the paper and they read this obituary, they're like, oh my gosh, look at this. Who's this guy he's writing about? Like, what is going on? So he almost brought more attention to Poe than he ever would have gotten in the first place. And one of the lines that I read from the obituary that he led off with was, Edgar Allan Poe is dead. He died in Baltimore the day before yesterday. This announcement will startle many, but few will be grieved by it. So he leads off.
He pulls you right in.
He pulls you right in. You're like, man, what is, and I'm sure it was a long one because Griswold probably had a few things to say.
Yeah. And so it's further published throughout the country. Once this is published, and again, it's so scathing and that's going to sell, it's reprinted, which a lot of newspapers did at the time throughout the country. Everyone wants to read this sensational obituary. And so the announcement, was just so widespread, but then it's soon, Ludwig, people wanted to know who was this Ludwig guy? And it's soon identified as Griswold. And then this grudge comes out. But what Griswold also does, again, this man, he wants to really stick it to Poe, is the only person left alive at this point who has the literary rights to Poe's writing is his mother-in-law. So when we visit the Poe grave, I tell you he's buried beside his mother-in-law / aunt and his wife / cousin. So Maria Clem, his mother-in-law, is also left destitute, right? Her daughter has died. Her son-in-law has died. And she has the rights to his writing. And Griswold approaches her before it comes out that he's the one who wrote this obituary. I will take good care of his writing. I will make sure it gets published. I will make sure you get paid. I will make sure you get taken care of. And she has nothing at the time, and she believes him. So she signs over the literary rights to Edgar Allan Poe's work to Griswold.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Oh my, it's just like, he's so devious.
And then it says what he did with that, and then he right away he published let's see what it says here.
A memoir of the author.
A memoir of the author, right? And now Griswold, what he did, and we'll talk more about how Griswold was eventually found out and discredited, but what he did in that memoir is he physically altered and forged letters that Poe had written, making it look like Poe was a blackmailer and a traitor to his friends and all this stuff. But all his friends at the time, when this stuff comes out, they're like, wait a second, this isn't true. But you didn't have YouTube and Facebook and a way to publicly say like, hey, I'm his friend. That's not how it actually was. So it took time for people to actually go in. I want to say the next one was how it actually backfired on Griswold was there was someone here. Hold on.
But no, so it's going to backfire in a way that he doesn't even expect because it becomes a very popular, accepted biography source of Poe, but people love that he's this dangerous, devious,
this
dark man who writes these dark stories, and they must come from actual life experience, right? He's writing about his tortured soul and the things he's seen and the things he's done, right? Telltale Heart is about a heart being buried under a floorboard and it keeps beating. So he depicts Poe as the actual guy who could have done this, and people love that sensationalism.
Yeah, it's such an interesting kind of look back because at the time these things were just happening. Griswold had such a vendetta against Poe that he wrote this obituary that ended up getting more popular. Then he wrote this book, and people were like, "Oh, this is amazing!" And so now they kind of are seeking out this dark, tortured author's works, making Poe even more famous than he actually was. And then later.
But later his real friends come forward with the actual letters and this is what really, he wasn't like this at all. He actually was a very melancholy guy. He was a tortured soul, but he was a good guy. He was not sensational. Yeah.
So Sarah Helen Whitman, who was a friend of his, and I think another writer, wrote kind of like one of the initial true rebuttals in 1860. And so in 1860, she came out with a work called Edgar Allan Poe and His Critics. And it's basically used her own personal knowledge and kind of rebutted all the things that Griswold was saying. And then even later after that, in the 1870s to the 1880s, John Henry Ingram went through and actually kind of did the forensic, detective work to go and find some of these letters that were doctored and was actually able to uncover and prove that some of these letters that were in the initial Griswold supposed memoir, right, biography, that were altered, he proved it.
Yeah.
And so he proved it and got this very detailed researched work out, completely discrediting Griswold. And so everything over time just flipped, 180 on Griswold, and he kind of got his comeuppance.
So yeah, Poe dies in 1849. Griswold will publish this in 1850. And Griswold dies in 1857. So for 7 years, he really champions this, pushes it hard, creates this whole persona for Poe. It backfires on him. People want to know more about Poe. They want to read his stuff. They want to, who is this real bad guy and what did he write? And so in 1860, after Griswold has died, is when the first people start to dismantle this. And it continues to be dismantled for about 15 years later. And this gains notoriety in casting Griswold as the bad guy and Griswold as this terrible person.
As this petty rival.
But Poe keeps the mystique. Poe keeps that persona. Poe gets more popular than ever. And that's why you read him in school today. And that's why his grave is so important. Now, what happens is when he's buried in the old Westminster burial ground, there's not even enough money for a marker for him. He's buried in his family plot. Again, he comes from this aristocrat family of an early business family of Baltimore. So they have a nice family plot in one of the original burial grounds. And he's buried there with a rock that says 80 on it. That's it, right? Once his mother-in-law passes, she's buried beside him. Virginia is left in New York. Virginia is put into a friend's tomb, and because Poe can't afford to bury her at the time, and she's forgotten, basically. And so the people of Baltimore, because he's become so popular and because people visit his grave and they go to the folklore and they want to visit on Halloween and read The Raven to him, they start a collection to get him a marker, to have something in the cemetery to commemorate him. Well, it takes about 25 years, and they've gathered enough money that it is too big to put in the actual Poe family plot location. If you go there and you see our video and see the actual location, I take you to both, it would take up the whole space, basically. Now, in the Poe family plot is, of course, his dad is there, his brother is there, Poe is there. He was there with his mother-in-law. So they moved Poe and his mother-in-law to the front of the cemetery. And that when Virginia was buried in a tomb of a friend, that cemetery in New York, as you can imagine, as New York expanded, became forgotten. And they were moving bones. And one of Poe's friends knew Virginia was there and went himself and collected her bones.
Wow.
And saved them. So when they moved him to the front of the Baltimore cemetery in 1875 with the new marker, he said, I think he would like to be buried with his wife, Virginia. I actually have saved her bones. I have them here. And so she was also moved there as well. So she wasn't originally buried in the back area, and she was moved there when they moved the original stone. So this is all garnered, though, after his life, right? This popularity of Poe is after his life. He's originally buried with a rock. That's how much popularity and money he had at the time. And so really, I don't know if you want to thank Griswold, but we think of Poe today. We honor Poe today, the mystery of him. Even when I visited there, there's so much atmosphere around his grave. So many people still visit there, right? It's very popular to go see Edgar Allan Poe's grave. The Baltimore Ravens are named for him. I don't know if this would have happened without the conspiracy to slander him as hard as Griswold did after he died.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And so that's why in the intro, when I mentioned kind of his monument, the memorial for him and his wife and his mother-in-law, it's very obvious. It's very easy to see from the street. You can see it through, if the cemetery is not open. So go, watch our video, or if you're in Baltimore, go check it out. His other original plot, right? They do have a headstone with a raven on it, right? So there's been things that have kind of been built up over time in the Poe family plot. Now, tell me about the toaster.
So again, famous deaths provide more colorful characters to come out and commemorate them. And so you'll get that with Rudolph Valentino, that famous actor. There was a mysterious lady who would always come to his grave dressed in black on the anniversary of his death. With Edgar Allan Poe, you get the toaster. So a gentleman who would go on the anniversary of his death.
I believe so.
And bring 3 roses and drink, was it bourbon?
I think it was like cognac or something.
Cognac to him. And drink half the bottle or take a couple shots and then leave the rest for him. And did this for years. How many years was it?
It was like decades.
Decades. And then his son did it.
Yeah, picked up. So apparently there was probably some local people who knew who it was.
So people, even when I was there were 3 dead roses on the grave. And people do it in homage and remembrance, right? Of not only Poe, but of this person who honored Poe for so long. And so people will leave the 3 roses. I have not been there on Halloween or his anniversary of his death. I bet your cognac is left there as well.
Yeah. So read my notes here. It looks like the toaster tradition started 100 years after he passed. So in 1949, someone started it in Baltimore, did it for decades. And then that person passed. His son picked up the tradition in 2009, did it for a couple more years. And then I think local in Baltimore, someone said, hey, now this is kind of officially done. But now that they'll do it during the day. They'll go on Halloween, they'll go on the anniversary of his death, right? I'm sure there's local tour groups and stuff like that do it.
And the 3 roses is supposed to represent Poe, his mother-in-law, and his wife.
Yeah.
So it's for Maria and Virginia. But we feel the legacy of Poe today. You especially, like your family history with Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock is a Poe fan.
Yeah.
He said he started I liked Edgar Allan Poe stories, and so I began to write suspense films.
Oh, wow.
Right? So
that's a direct link there.
The direct link. Poe has inspired so many of us today when it comes to suspense and the macabre and the gothic. I would even say, the reason Stephen King is so popular is because it's all the foundation laid by Poe. And so we celebrate him. It was an honor to visit him. And if you want to see the location, don't forget to download our app, historyofdrive.com. I'll take you right there to where he's located in Baltimore. He's right at the front of the cemetery, and he's waiting there for you.
As you walk out of the iron gates of the Westminster burying ground and leave Edgar Allan Poe to his eternal rest, the mystery of the man still lingers in the Baltimore air. It is entirely fitting that America's master of horror didn't get a neat, tidy ending. Instead, he left us with an unsolved puzzle, a final chapter written in delirium, missing clothes, and a legacy that grew from a forgotten, unmarked plot into a towering literary monument. Standing by his gravesite reminds us that while the body may fail, a brilliant, tortured mind can echo through the centuries, capturing the imagination of every generation that dares to peer into the dark. If you ever find yourself in Baltimore, take a detour into the shadows, visit Westminster Hall, and look for the raven carved into the stone. Pay your respects to the man who taught us how to love a good mystery. Just keep an eye out for a cloaked stranger carrying 3 roses. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
This has been a Walk with History production. Talk with History is created and hosted by me, Scott Benny. Episode researched by Jennifer Benny. Check out the show notes for links and references mentioned in this episode. Talk with History is supported by our community at thehistoryroadtrip.com. Make sure you hit that follow button in that podcast player, and we'll talk to you next time. How many times have you driven past a piece of history without even knowing it? Stop missing out. The History of Drive app puts over 500 historic locations right on your screen, revealing the incredible stories hidden just off the highway. Follow our trail with expert-led videos, podcasts, and one-click GPS directions, all for a launch price of just $2.50. Don't just drive, discover. Visit historyordrive.com today.